Uh-oh. Hello, greetings, happy day. Hope that you are well. Hope that you're at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. And if you are not, for some reason, that you are rapidly approaching your full potential. We're glad that you have decided to join us for this exciting episode of our Ancestors' Voices, where today we're going to be talking about the very critical topic of the I ain't no African mindset. I ain't no African mindset. We want to talk about this from the standpoint, we want to establish with this topic that we're not angry at any of our people who say this type of thing. We're not angry because we know the reasons why this is happening. And that's what we want to talk about today. If we're angry at anything, it's the capitalist system because that is the true cause of why this confusion exists. It is the capitalist system that benefits from this confusion, and that's why it consistently perpetuates it. So that's who our anger is directed at. We're not directed at, we don't have that anger at any of our people. And this is what we want to talk about today because, I mean, frankly, we haven't come in contact with any of them that can reasonably articulate their position. So there's no reason for us to be angry about it. When we say that we're African people, we know exactly why we're saying that. We know exactly how to demonstrate it with historical and scientific evidence. So there's no reason for us to be angry about anything. We just want the truth to come out so that we can forge the necessary unity that will bring us the freedom and forward progress that we want and deserve. Even if we don't deserve it today, our future generations deserve it. So this is really what's in our focus. This is really what's important. This is really why we would talk about a subject like this. So we're glad that you're joining us. We give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the actual indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We're talking about the Mexicanos, the Puerto Ricanos, the Chicanos, the folks who call themselves Indians or natives. Those are the folks that the descendants of the Mayans, the Incas, the Aztecs, the Lakotas. These people are indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. And we have to, if we want respect from other communities, and we have to give respect to other communities. If we're disrespecting them, wiping out their history, then we shouldn't act like we don't understand why they don't respect our history. In fact, if I were them, I wouldn't respect our history if we were making up fictional accounts of what happened in these Americas to discredit them and to lift ourselves up because we just don't know our actual history and are intellectually lazy and don't want to find out because we don't see the payday attached to it. So we give honor to the indigenous people, the legitimate indigenous people. And of course, we would never do a single thing to dishonor our African ancestors because a lot of this it does exactly that. It dishonors our people who gave their lives up so that so many of us could be here today. And we are really just dribbling the opportunities that our ancestors provided to us completely out of bounds. So many of us are engaged in life activities that contribute absolutely nothing to our forward progress as a people on a collective level. And others of us, make up fantasies about who we are and create all types of confusion because we have specific agendas in mind that are designed to benefit us individually without doing anything to advance the masses of our people. And this is what we always have to remember. Whenever you see something happening, the first question that you have to ask yourself if you're struggling to understand what it is that you're looking at and what's exactly happening, the very first question you have to ask yourself is whatever it is, who's at the end of the day, who's going to be the beneficiary of it? Who is it benefiting? If you see them on television talking about our youth are ratchet and our women are loud and ratchet, who benefits from that analysis? Clearly, none of our people do. Who is it that benefits from that? If you see them saying that we're criminals Who benefits? If you see them saying that everybody that immigrates here from the Americas is a criminal and is stealing jobs, who benefits from that analysis? Who benefits from it? So that's the question that we have to learn to ask ourselves. And I think once we begin to understand how to answer that, it'll help us understand much clearer what it is we're facing. So we just like to start, as always, with just our brief introductions. Just wanting to make sure people understand who we are. This program, Our Ancestors' Voices, sponsored by All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP, which is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party with its base in Africa, the national home of all people of African descent, 2.5 billion people scattered and suffering in almost 120 countries worldwide. And our objective to address that is Pan-Africanism. That is the solution. It's a clear solution with a concrete analysis about how we get out of this situation that we're in. And we start with the correct definition because someone the other day, one of these I ain't no African people, was saying to me, well, Pan Africanism has never done anything for us. And I said, so define Pan Africanism. Well, we don't have to talk. I'm like, no, I just asked you for a definition. You just said it hasn't done anything for us. So without question, you should have a clear definition of something you're saying doesn't benefit us. Anytime you're saying something benefits us or doesn't benefit us, you should at least, at the very least, be able to define it. So I said again, so what is the definition of Pan-Africanism? I never got one because there wasn't one to be given. And that's why we always start with a clear definition, because a lot of the problem with this misinformation and confusion is that in this day and age, you don't need to study anything in this society. You don't need to have any credentials that demonstrate that you have done the work to have a credible analysis about anything in this society. All you need is an internet account and a big ass mouth, and you can say whatever you want. And most of the people who are listening are just as intellectually lazy as you are, if not more so. So if it fits whatever kind of convenient narrative that they want to have for whatever agenda purposes that they possess, then they'll go with it. Whether it at any level connects with reality is irrelevant in this approach, in this perspective. So we say the definition of Pan-Africanism is one unified socialist Africa. And we say that that is the solution to the problems we face as African people everywhere. And we know that if we had revolutionary Pan-Africanism in practice today, none of this stuff that we're talking about in this program would exist, because there'd be no reason for it to exist. Because what the people claiming to be all these other things are really after is some sort of pathway to resources and respect. That's what they're really trying to achieve. And I can't blame them for wanting to achieve that. The only difference is that I don't need to create fantasies to achieve that, because I know it's not never going to happen without the real work required to make it happen. And a lot of other people want to create shortcuts. They don't want to do real work. And that's why we face these problems that we're facing right now. So our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, it's outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. The cover is on this page. And this program each week is sponsored by myself, Ajamu, and my ideological, biological daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you. Greetings, all. We hope you are well. Thank you so much for being with us today. A conversation of identity, such an important one. And we will get started in just a moment. I just wanted to comment, Baba Jamu, you said that the person told you they said Pan-Africanism has never done anything for us, but yet they couldn't even define what it was. And I think that's precisely why we need to have this conversation, you all, and just, kind of think about how that doesn't make any sense. If you're saying that something is in favor of something or is not in favor of something, at the very least, you should be able to define it. And I guess we would argue, take that same approach, even when it comes to you thinking about what your identity is and how it's connected, especially if you are African or if you do descend from the continent of Africa, right? So Malcolm X said that we are Africans because, quote, if a cat has kittens in an oven, you don't call them biscuits, end quote. Marcus Garvey said that it is impossible to love the tree while hating its roots. It's one of my favorite quotes by Marcus Garvey. And I would also add Dr. Kwame Nkrumah is very well known in the party for his quote that circulates where he says often, we are not African because we were born in Africa, because that's what a lot of people get hung up on, is they'll say, well, I wasn't born there, so, therefore I was born in America, so I'm an American. Instead, Dr. Nkrumah says we're not born in Africa because, excuse me, we're not African because we were born in Africa. We are African because Africa was born in us. And I would strongly encourage us to think about just exactly what that means. The good news is, you have so many resources that Dr. Nkrumah wrote where you can go into more detail, reading more about his work, his thoughts, his biography, his experiences growing up in Ghana, his experiences when he was seeking education, from being educated on the continent to being educated in London, even his time in the US when he went to I know you'll help me out. The school, Lincoln University. So he had so many different experiences that he wrote about, right? And like Marcus Garvey, he noted that everywhere he was going, Africans were struggling. They were struggling to pay their bills. They were struggling to keep their employment. They were struggling to keep food on the table. They were struggling to seek education. They were struggling from a health standpoint. They had some of the worst health outcomes, and they did not have the best access to treatment or medical care, whatever that looks like. Even the way they were being treated in the medical settings was not conducive or comparative when it came to Europeans and how they were interacting with society. So I think that, just kind of thinking about what Malcolm X said about, we are Africans because if a cat has kittens in the oven, you don't call them biscuits. And then Garvey saying that you can't love the tree without hating the roots. Again, like what Baba Jamu said earlier, like who is that benefiting to enforce and push that narrative? To say that people who are coming into America are criminals and drug dealers. Who benefits to say that? Who is the one who benefits to say that? We would add to that list and say, who benefits to say that, African women are the worst kind of partners and that's why no one should date African women? Who behind that microphone speak piece, you all? Who is the one benefiting from that? Right? And we would continue to add to that argument if the objective is to make sure that we are not connected to our African heritage, to make sure that we are not connected to understanding just how much that identity of being African, how profound it is, how magnificent it is, actually how glorifying it is, and how much enrichment comes with that. Because we know, after we've said many, many times in different seminars, that because Africa is the richest continent on the planet, like we have to kind of think about, well, why would the oppressor not want us to know that? Right? Really thinking about that. Why would the oppressor not want us to be connected to that? Why would the oppressor not want us to get passports to go home to Africa? Why would the oppressor use all this media and propaganda to paint the picture that Africa is, a non-humane place and it's only filled with animals who are living in a magical kingdom and all this stuff? So that, we're less and less likely to do the research. Why would it be so difficult for you to learn about somebody like Kwame Nkrumah, to learn about somebody like Marcus Garvey, to learn about someone like Malcolm X? Well, because the closer you get to putting the pieces together from an ideological standpoint, from an economic standpoint, you can start to make all these connections from an educational standpoint, and you can start to see that it greatly benefits African people to organize together and unite. They cannot organize or unite together unless they have a collective shared consciousness, not so much what Du Bois was talking about, but just a shared consciousness where we all have similar things that we have studied and researched and analytically broken down to where we all understand that we are stronger together than we are individually. Until we all understand that, of course, not all of us are going to want to have an identity of African. Of course, because it's not sexy to be African. It's not attractive to be African. Being African means that you have all these negative stereotypes that are associated with that particular statement. And no one wants to be associated with that because, again, the person who benefits the most, the group, I would say, who benefits the most, have worked really hard to create these harmful stereotypes. They have worked really hard to embrace the microaggressions that we experience. They have worked really hard to protect white supremacy, colonialism, even imperialism that we don't talk about as much, right? So I just think it's important to just make all those connections and note that, right? And to really be able to think about what Nkrumah was saying. You know, what is it about Africa being born in us that we can embrace? Even if we never ever step foot on the continent, what is it about Africa being born in us? I remember Baba Ajamu said several seminars ago, he was talking about how, African folks, we have a different way that we communicate. And I mean that in so many ways. I mean, how we literally say words is very different from other people. He talked about, the different connections when it comes to the linguistics in terms of how we pronounce words. So Kroger was a very famous grocery store in Memphis. And a lot of times when I would talk to elder African folks, they would add an S at the end. And I never understood that until I watched this seminar. So I really appreciated that. But I also mean how we communicate in terms of our mm-hms and our mm-ms and our like all of that is so enriching, you all. And nobody else can do that the way we do it. Like nobody else can do that. My mom and I were joking yesterday because we were watching this series. Cedric the Entertainer has a series with Tashina Arnold called The Neighborhood. And there's a European family that lives next door to them. And they're getting to know, the African customs and cultures and vice versa. And so the European is talking to his partner and he's like, well, I'm spending some time with Tina. That's the African woman character. And he's like, but I just want to know, like, how do I interact with her? Because I don't really know. We don't really have much in common, just the two of us. And his partner said, well, there's not much about Tina. Like, you know her, you've hung out with her. Just know that she don't have time. And then her partner was like, she doesn't have time for what? And then she said back to him, I don't know, but she never has time. And so, like, just this idea of like me as an African woman, like, I probably say that at least 20 times an hour. Like, ain't nobody got time for that because that is a part of the African identity, you all, where even the idea of me thinking about something, I'm like, no, let's try to find a more easier way. Let's try to minimize that because it's probably really rooted, connected, unfortunately, to exploitation and trauma. Really, if I really break it down from an analytical standpoint, which I hadn't really done. But I'm just saying, like, just from a joking standpoint, everybody got time. Like, we say that all the time. We say that all the time. We deduce things and we're like, no, that don't make any sense. Like, we clown people, we call people out. If they're doing dumb stuff, we're like, you acting real dumb right now. Like, we do that, especially with our friends that we love and we respect, right? So I'm speaking from the African perspective because that is what I know. Not to say that other cultures don't do these things. I would have to do more learning to learn about other cultures, but I'm telling you what I know because this is me, right? And I'm telling you these things so we can understand that. Even my participant for my dissertation last year, it was kind of a joke, but she was actually unfortunately saying a really serious thing. But the provider asked her, how are you doing? And she had already been going in because she was chronically regurgitating. She couldn't keep anything down. And it wasn't even like the typical morning sickness. It was much, much more further advanced than that. And it was really terrible. She couldn't even keep water down. So she literally was just starving during her pregnancy. It was the worst thing ever. And so the doctor knew that and was like, how's it going? And she was like, you see me over here throwing up. I'm not doing good. Like, I just thought that was so telling for her to say that to the provider. And even though it wasn't funny, it kind of was because it's like, I'm not doing good. Why would you ask me that? Because that's who we are as a people, right? That's who we are. We're not going to sugarcoat things, especially when it's right in front of us. So I just really appreciate who we are. And it's really unfortunate that not everybody wants to be connected to that. I understand that white supremacy punishes you when you are connected to that. I understand colonialism shames you and makes you think that you shouldn't be connected to it. You should be embarrassed. You should feel like you have to act a certain way. And we all could talk about the mask and the professionalism and what even is professionalism. Like we could talk about all that stuff all day. But at the end of the day, like just understanding your identity is all you have. That's literally all you have. And as much as you try to suppress it and resist it, there's a saying that we have in my therapy group. It's called what is it? What you suppress, it expresses, right? So the more you're trying to push it down, the more it builds up, right? And so I would argue, even though that's a therapeutic phrase, like I would argue the trauma that we have endured as African people from our enslavement of our ancestors, we are trying to suppress that because we don't want to be who we naturally born and biologically are. And that is a danger, not only to us, but to us achieving a Pan-Africanist Africa, achieving that, being able to organize for that, and more importantly, preserving who we are as a people, even in this new world of this United States of Socialist Africa. Next slide, please. If we don't know who we are now while we're fighting for a socialist Africa, then how are we going to know who we are later? And how will we know who we are when we're talking to our friends? Or if we choose to have children, if we choose to have nieces and nephews, like what does that conversation look like? We all know what the drastic drawbacks are when you are trying to ignore something and it's right in front of you. And I think if you're trying to ignore like the truth about something, that makes it harder because you can only ignore the truth but for so long. If you're trying to ignore the fact that, you know, this is a part of your destiny, I think that will make it really difficult and challenging because you can't undo what's already been written for you. You can't undo that. You can put on all the bleaching cream that you want. You can, you know, alter the chemicals in your hair. You can change the nose structure. You can do all these things, but you still are going to be African at the end of the day. It will come up when people hear you talk. It will come up in how you express yourself. If you're looking at people like this, or if you're saying things like, I don't have time for that, like, or just doing these kind of things that we don't even think about that we do because we are African and that's why we do them. I even like the TikTok videos of it showing first African families with their dogs, because clearly we raise our dogs differently than other cultures do. But I like specifically the African women and how they talk to their dogs because it's really, really entertaining to me. And again, I think that is a testament to who we are as a people, right? Just the other day, my dog was sniffing something that I didn't want her sniffing. And I'm not sure why I couldn't say, leave it, because she knows that command very well. The first thing that came out of my mouth was, mm-mm, and she knew what that meant. She knew what that meant because she was raised in an African household. Of course, she knew what that meant. That's not the first time I've said that to her. And she's very smart, yes, but it's not really about her being smart. It's about the consistency of the African culture, you all. That's what it's about. And not denying it. Not denying it because you are who you are. And I will also say you have a right to be who you are. That is resisting white supremacy and being who you are. I show these videos to my students every semester, especially as it relates to disparities that are connected to racial and ethnic groups. And when I show the indigenous video, one of the comrades, May, I just love her so much. She talks about how the best way that she can resist colonization is to not practice Catholicism and to use her indigenous native name, even though people have already renamed her an English American name, right? And so I just, again, like, this is what we're talking about, you all. We're not denying who we are. We are fully embracing it because that is one of the few things that is going to save us during this time of uncertainty, during this time that things are going to get more worse physically, ideologically, emotionally. All we have is who we are. And really, all we have is who we are because our ancestors worked so hard to lay out the paver bricks for us to step on. And so it's also like immensely disrespectful to not acknowledge the choices that they had to make so that we could be in the positions we are in today. It is immensely disrespectful because they did not go through all of that so that we could just forget about our lineage and, more importantly, forget about our responsibilities. That is unacceptable. It is not appropriate, and we need to do better. If you are not someone who sees this as a collective mission, you severely are mistaken. And you need to think about all of the names that you know, the Miss Fannie Lou Hamers, the Rosa Parks, the Carlotta Lusumis, the Tatina Salinas. You need to think about all of these people, the Teodora Gomes, the Thomas Sankaras, the Amilcar Cabrals. You need to think about all of these people and think about people you don't even know their name because they didn't even get credit for what they did. And then sit there and ask yourself, how dare you just completely disregard all that they did so that you could have a fighting chance? Who are you? What right do you have to do that? Who are you to even do that? If nothing else, you should be working twice as hard to do half as much as what they did. Because without them, we would not be alive, you all. That is a fact. The fact that they sacrificed and had to figure out a way to escape, the fact that they had to organize slave revolts, the fact that they had to find a way to fight back, the fact that they had to teach one another how to fight, the fact that our people figured out how to cook hush puppies. So when we were escaping plantations, we could throw the dogs off our trails. All of that is us, you all. That is our ingenuity. That is our significance and innovation and contributions to research and to survival. So for us to deny all of that because it's not attractive to be African, who are we and the audacity that we hold to do that? That is unacceptable, inappropriate, disrespectful, and not conducive for our lineage as African people. It certainly has no place in this space and it cannot be tolerated moving forward. It cannot. It cannot. So we also have a responsibility to hold one another accountable. As I prepare to wrap up this slide, I'll just say that our loving legend, Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, always said, quote, never define yourself in the negative, end quote. And we were just talking about that again with my mom earlier today. I think she was reminiscing on some of the work that her and the younger comrades had done when they were in their college years. And, you know, they would walk up to Africans, giving them flyers for ALD or Pan African Women's Day, whatever, any institutions that we were doing. And the Africans might say, because they don't know any better, I ain't no African. I ain't no African, as the title of the slide said. And so, like this idea of the double negative, right? Like what that looks like. Because if you're not that, then what are you, right? And also, like we can't really say that you're not African because, as we have talked about in other seminars, these DNA tests have already revealed that they're not going to show they're not going to not show Africa on there, is what I'm saying. And I guess I just did a double negative too. But Africa is going to be on there somewhere. It has to be because you are African. It has to be. You can't be African and it just show Asia and Russia. That doesn't make any sense. You can't be African and it just show Louisiana and Alabama. That doesn't make any sense. Also, a formerly video that KT did, Kwame Ture, the comrade said that they were, French, and Creole. And he said, but where was your family before they got to Louisiana? Where were they before? And the African couldn't explain it because, of course, we all know the answer. Of course we do. We know the answer. So I think that we need to just kind of be smarter about this. African deniers always start with, I ain't no African, because that's the most important part of their presentation. It has never been what they are, but more so it is what they are trying to get away from, trying to get away from. And we talked a little bit about that in the previous slide, but this idea of not wanting to be connected to it because it's not sexy, it's not attractive, people are more likely to make fun of you. Like I said, there's other qualifiers. If you are African, you are more likely to have curlier hair, and that's not considered attractive in this society. If you are African, your skin is darker, that's not attractive. If you are African, you have more voluptuous parts of your body, your lips, your cheekbones are probably higher. You probably have more obviously melanin, but you also have more curves and shapes with your body. All of that is not attractive, right? I remember a time where it was so attractive to be as skinny as possible and petite. And you can't be voluptuous and petite according to the white supremacists. So there's all these things, right, that are telling us we're not enough. And this is why we have the skin bleaching and we have the plastic surgery and we have the this and we have the that. We have the chemicals to straighten our hair. We have the flat irons. We have all these things because we are not enough. But it's crazy to think about that because you also have cultures that are trying really hard to be us. And we don't really think about that as much. We're so busy pricking and primping ourselves that we don't think about how society has continued to try to be us in more ways than one. In more ways than one. I will close with this, reading the caption under the photo for the slide. The Tarzan television show of 1966 was one of the many efforts to portray Africa as primitive and underdeveloped. The show depicted a European as the king of the jungle in Africa. All the animals bowed to this European while the Africans were terrified of the animals. And I think that is a great depiction right there. You have this European that the animals are more likely to respect and listen to. Meanwhile, the Africans who are indigenous to the land are scared of the animals. Also, don't get me started on the fact that the European was depicted as the king in the jungle. Like we're not even going to go into that, right? So as I prepare to pass it back to Baba Ajamu, this will continue to be a really important conversation, you all. Really, really important. And also notice that our title of slide didn't say American, it just said African, because that's the other part is how do we resist and detach from the propaganda that has clearly been bestowed upon us? With that, I will yield the floor and give it back to Baba Ajamu. Thank you.
Ashe, Obrigada, Asante Sana. Thank you very much. And I'm going to, for the few minutes we have left, everyone, I'm going to take this from a different perspective. For me, this discussion is not about proving that we come from Africa. I couldn't care less if people want to be African or not. Like if you don't want to be, because I know why the people that are African and don't want to be that don't want to be it. So I'm not like it's a dignity question for me. It's not about trying to convince anybody or validate anything to anyone. If you want to live your life based on fantasies, then I could sell you some tickets to Disneyland and you have a good time. So that's number one. Number two is this question of Africa. I ain't no African, right? I watched a video the other day of some dude, and he started the video off. Every video, this is exactly what he said, give or take a word or two. But he said, every video I've seen of Africa, I don't want anything to do with that. And so that was his basis for why he went into this tirade about how he's not African. Now imagine this. This is the world that we live in today, where Africa, which has thousands of years of civilization, it's the birthplace of human existence, has been reduced to this fool seeing a video and making an entire determination about thousands of years of culture and civilization based on one, two, or even 10 videos. And that just speaks to how intellectualism has vanished in this society, right? Everything is about what I feel and what I think. Everything is form over essence. Everything is is anecdotal. You know what I experience on an individual level. Nothing is well. If I saw something in the video that I didn't like, what are the conditions that created the reality that I didn't like? None of it. None of that is ever discussed. Just whatever I feel in the moment, that's the scientific definition of how the world functions. And that is a dangerous place for any people to ever exist in because there's all types of evidence available for us to determine how to come to more concrete solutions for how we should see things, right? Like they're always you can go on so they're always on social media talking about some random person from Nigeria or Ghana or wherever who came over here and said some dumbass things. And just based on that, that gives this person all the data they need to make their determination about thousands of years of African history, just based on some random fool who probably knows less about Africa than the fool telling the story. Just based on that, they can make a whole determination. I mean, that speaks to how ignorance has become acceptable in this society. Like people say this stuff and they don't even blink. Nobody challenges them, nothing, none of that. All of that has gone by the wayside. Everything now is whatever I say is feelings are fact. Whatever I feel, it's automatically a fact. When in reality, it should be, there's that saying, people make their feelings fact when facts should make your feelings. That's how things should work in a healthy world. So, for example, I've, as I've said many times, I've traveled and done work, Pan African work, all over the African continent. Right? I've been in Senegal and worked with hundreds of people from the National Democratic Rally, a Pan African organization there. Shakur, you were there when we did that. I went and spoke at the event. Was one of the main speakers at the event there. Hundreds of people. Everything was in French because that's what they speak there. They translated what I said. Hundreds of people. Because I'm saying this because a lot of these people always what they say is, well, they don't even respect us in Africa. They don't even like us. I saw the comedian Ari Spears, and I think he's very funny. But he has a whole routine about it. Africans don't even like us. And I'm saying, like, when I was in Senegal with the National Democratic Rally, hundreds of people, not a single person said, I don't like you. I don't want, they were all like, when are you moving home? Everybody. I've been to Guinea Bissau doing party work and was bestowed membership into the African Party for the Independence of Guinea Bissau, PAIGC, which is the political party founded by Amilcar Cabral. There are thousands, millions, I'm sorry, millions of members of the PAIGC. We went around on a tour and met thousands of them in, I think it was 8 different locations where they came to meet us. Not one of those people was like, you shouldn't be here. I came here to tell you that you don't belong here. Everybody was so excited to see us and couldn't understand why more of us weren't there and weren't coming to Africa. I've been to Ghana multiple times. The Convention People's Party, the people there, same reception. No one's saying, oh, I don't know why you're here. You don't belong here. You're an American. Nobody is, not a single person is saying that to me. I've been to Zania in January, on what you call South Africa, worked with people there in the Pan Africanist Congress and the Azanian People's Order, not a single person telling me, well, what are you doing here? You're an American. Everybody, like, you're African. You come home. Everybody says the same thing. What took you so long? They don't understand that, I've been all over Africa. It's just the first time I've been to Zania. So they're like, to them, that's your first time coming home because that's where they are. So they're like, what took you so long? So this concept of like, they don't like us in Africa, that's absurd to someone like me, right? Especially when it's spoken by people who haven't traveled anywhere, haven't studied anything, and are just basing their entire analysis on what somebody dumber than them had to say. And that's really a great achievement, to be even dumber than where they are when they're making that statement. And they're basing their entire analysis on that. So that those kind of things, that's the foundation from how I see this, right? Because I know African history. I've been studying African history for 50 years. I read my first book when I was about 13 years old. So I have some understanding of it today. And I know things like the Society of Mali. My grandmother used to say, I'm going to send you to Timbuktu. And I had no clue when she was telling to me Timbuktu was some faraway place that nobody wanted to be. The way they said it to me, I had no idea that Timbuktu was the first university in the world, first documented university in the world in Mali, West Africa. The location is still there today. And I'm not saying that to make the point about proving people that they should be African based on history, because our interpretation of this is, of course, history is a part of everything. But really, for me, Africa, the role it plays in my life is where we're going, more so than where we've come from, where we're going. So that's why you never hear me use phrases like our heritage, or I don't even talk like that. I always talk about Africa in terms of what it will do for us in the future as a people, for future generations. That's the key point. And that's the point, because the problem with these people that say they ain't African is they don't have the vision of what Africa can do for them. In their mind, because they're just looking at right now, because these aren't people that are studying history. So they just look at right now. So for them, right now, the number one power on the earth is the United Snakes of America. This is where all the money is, all the wealth is. They don't think about where the wealth came from. It didn't come from here. They don't think about it like that. They just know the wealth is here. They see that the Europeans predominantly control the wealth, and they want to have pathways to have access to some of that. And so, with that vision and that mindset, there's nothing about Africa that would appeal to them because they can't get any of that today from Africa. So, of course, they're going to try to find some way to justify their relationship to the wealth where it presently is. It's no different than if you're in your house and someone performs a home invasion and they steal everything in your house. And then you have some people visiting you at the time that happens, and they say, look, I'll give you some of this if you help us. And that person says, yeah, they turn against you and they say, yeah, I'll help because I can get something out of it. I can get resources out of it. You know, Amali Yeshatila, the leader of the Uhuru movement, made an analogy years ago that made a lot of sense to me. He talked about how the indigenous people would take a spear and stick it in the snow in the northern territories, and they put animal blood on it and, you know, cover it up, and the animals would, thinking that it was food, would lick it and they would cut themselves their tongues and they would die. And that's how the people would get the game for eating. And he talked about how the animals, they thought that this was a resource, so they went to it because they thought it was something that would benefit them. And that's really, that analogy explains a whole lot about what's happening to us. We, many of us today, want to connect ourselves to the colonizer, to the slave master, to the capitalist, because in our eyes, that's where the resources are. So we think the only way we'll ever have resources is if we connect ourselves to the people who have put us in this position in the first place. And the problem with that, of course, is that the only way you can do that is by selling out the masses of our people. But these people are not really thinking about that. In fact, they see selling us out as a strategic imperative. That's why they're xenophobic. They always talk about, well, Idris Alba, born in Britain, he's stealing roles from those of us born here. They talk about nonsense like that. The white man controls the role. He's the one giving it out. Your black ass wasn't going to get it. It had nothing to do with where you were born. He gave it to him. He gives it to you. It doesn't matter. We don't control that industry. That's the point. And they got you convinced that there's some kind of scarcity thing going on and we have to compete against each other. Who benefits from that kind of thinking? Clearly, we have not. You can't show me one instance where we are the people benefiting from the scarcity analysis, that we have to see each other as being in competition with each other for us to move forward. That is the mentality of a slave, a crabs in a barrel type mentality. That's not even, there's no such thing as crabs in a barrel, but y'all say that, so I'm going to use it. That's what that is. It has nothing to do with what's really going to benefit us and move us forward. So we have so much shame about Africa that that's what happens is that, you know, we begin to find ways to justify disconnecting ourselves from it. I mean, the hate against Africa is real. It's all over the internet. And for me, this is a coordinated effort. We've seen this before. It's not the first time this has happened. And when the US was supporting the destabilization of the Congo, when the National Congolese Movement won independence with Patrice Lumumba in 1960, the US was frightened because the Congo had the world's largest supply at that time of uranium, which is used to make atomic power, nuclear power. And the US was engaged in this arms race against the then Soviet Union, which you call Russia today. And so the US wanted to make sure they would continue to have access to that atomic power, which they had when Belgium controlled the Congo. And when the Africans in the Congo said, we want the Congo for ourselves, there was a threat to that. So they began to engage in destabilization efforts. What they did is they got Africans from Cuba who had sold out the Cuban Revolution, and they sent them over there. The Central Intelligence Agency did that. They sent them over there, and they had those people engaging in terrorist acts against the Africans in the Congo. And they videotape this. This is all in CIA files that they've been forced through legal action to reveal. Well, we've studied them. This is not our opinion. We don't go by anecdotal analysis. We don't make feelings fact. We've done the research. We've done the hard study, and we know what the hell we're talking about. This is what these crackers did. They sent Africans down there, and they had them performing these heinous acts against the people, and then they would come on TV and tell you this is what the communists from the National Congolese movement are doing. And then you would see it, or your parents or your grandparents, oh yeah, that's not good. They're not good. America's there to free the people from that. When in reality, when the MNC fighters, the National Congolese movement fighters, and caught some of these people, because once Che Guevara took the Cubans down there, they helped them get better, and they began to start capturing some of these people. And when they captured them, these goddamn people didn't speak a word of Lingala, which is the dominant language in the Congo. They didn't speak French, which is a language spoken in the Congo. They didn't speak anything but Spanish, maybe a little English. So clearly they weren't Congolese, right? And so the Africans in the Congo from the liberation movement began to expose this. And this is how people began to go down there and research that and find out the truth. They have a history of using us against us to serve their interests. I could give you a million examples like the one like that, because again, we study history. We don't sit here and just try to scrape up coins to have an internet account and just vomit out bullshit out of our mouths. We study history. And so we know this. The hate against Africa is all over the internet. But the reason why you know it's coordinated is because it's all over the internet. We don't have that level of organization. You haven't seen us all over the internet talking about how we need to unite to get free. You don't even see us, those of us who say, well, we're just different here in America, you don't even see that happening, where we're on there consistently talking about unity. But you can pull up your phone right now and you can find some graham cracker Negro on there within 5 minutes who's talking against Africa. Everywhere you can find that. That's a coordinated campaign. And one of the ways you can know that is if it was real, if it was tied to reality, you wouldn't see it all over the place on the internet and hardly ever see it in real life. Like, you go to events that our people have, right? Go to the Martin Luther King Day March when his birthday comes. You'll see Africa everywhere. People have on African clothes, African jewelry, African earrings, African flags, everything will be there. You go to Juneteenth, Africa is everywhere. These people try to make you think, oh, there's a separate flag for Juneteenth because we're not a part of the rest of these people from Africa. But you don't even see that, Harley. You see it every once in a while, but mostly you see red, black, and green flags. 10 to 1, you see that. My point being is, on the ground, people aren't, that's not a dominant thing on the ground. Africa is everywhere. There's no reason why it wouldn't be everywhere, because it's accurate for it to be everywhere. But online, you see all this kind of confusion all the time, like you see on the screen. And some of this is intellectual laziness and ignorance, no question. And it's orchestrated with xenophobia. But really, think about it. Who does this benefit? So, Africans born in America should be fighting Africans born outside of America, practicing xenophobia. We see it happening in Azania. We see it happening here. Who does that benefit? African men should be fighting against African women. You can go on social media and see African men align with Europeans attacking African women. Who does that benefit? Who the hell does that benefit? You see Africans here saying we ain't African, fighting against Africans here. Who does all this division benefit? It no way. You need your head examined if you believe that any of that in any way benefits us. You need your head examined, or you need to take your medication, whatever the case may be. If you believe any of this benefits us, it benefits only the people who are rising their wealth from us being divided. That's who it benefits. So that's why they promote this scarcity analysis. This scarcity analysis that, and what we mean by that is they present this analysis that there's not enough resources to go around. And so we have to protect the resources from other people, including our own people. That's what they want us to believe, right? And it's tied to this, what Shakur talked about, this desire to have a prestigious identity, right? So there's money, potential money, if you're indigenous to the Americas. So that's a resource. So these people want to have access to these resources. There's certainly money tied to America because America's stolen everybody else's wealth. So there's resources there. So they want to be tied to that. So they want to try to figure out a way to parlay an identity into some economic resources. They don't see any of that with Africa. And that's why it's difficult to get them to want to see themselves as connected to Africa. In fact, they see being connected to Africa as a negative because Africa is not respected. And everybody wants to be respected. So you just have a hard time telling them that, well, the way you get respect is by connecting yourself to something that's not respected. Because we don't understand that our people have always had to work for our dignity. We have to work to preserve our dignity. Everybody wants everything handed to them on a platter. It's never going to happen like that for us. We have been subjected to some of the worst treatment in human history. We are going to have to fight to dig ourselves out of that. And a lot of us are not willing to do that. We've become very weak. We become very superficial here. You know, you put us in 90-degree heat in this country for 10 minutes and we can't stand it. Our ancestors picked cotton in that goddamn weather with humidity for hours all day and dealt with it. And dealt with it because they knew they had to do it so that we could be here to have a chance. And now our lazy, worthless asses can't stay in the heat 5 minutes without complaining. You're a damn disgrace if you're like that. And you're a disgrace to our history and our ancestors. You're a disgrace to it. You're not worth a bowl of dog dookie to be handed to you. I'm just telling you like it is. I hope you hate it so bad that you explode. So who is benefiting from all this nonsense? We got to understand this part of it. There are a little over 1.5 billion Africans living in Africa. There are approximately 1 billion of us living outside of Africa, the so-called diaspora. Africa is the poorest place in the world today. Africans living in almost 120 countries in Africa, Europe, and the Americas are consistently the poorest people everywhere we exist. I've traveled to almost 30 countries. I've seen it everywhere that's the case. There's not one case where we're at the top of the society and other people are below us. We're always on the bottom. But the contradiction is that while all that is true and all that is happening, meanwhile, Africa is uber rich in resources. It's the richest land base on the planet Earth, richer than every other land base combined. That is just an objective fact. And if you don't want to believe us, go to your trusted master and look at his resources. Look at Fortune 500. Look at all these goddamn capitalist research analyst magazines, and they'll tell you that. They'll tell you that since you can only believe them. Some of us only believe them. So go to them and they'll tell you that. So the question is, who is getting the riches today? Clearly, we're not. And who stands to lose if we wake up to this reality and decide that we should not be poor when we produce all the riches that all these other people are stealing from us? Who's going to lose when we gain that level of consciousness? The people who you see on this damn screen: De Beers Diamonds, Shell Oil, Chevron, Apple, Samsung, Tesla, Nestle, Firestone, and all these wicked crackers all over the world. They're the ones who are going to lose when we wake up. So it's in their interest to keep us confused and divided. And there are, unfortunately, a significant number of us who are willing to take not even a real payday, but just the potential of one to sell us out just for that small potential. The reality is, most of those damn graham crackers, they'll never get anything from doing all this damage against our people. Most of these people aren't going to get a damn thing. And mark my words, 5 years from now, they won't even be talking about Africa. They'll have some new scam that they're utilizing that they can try to get some money out of. These people change every 5, 10 years. They change. This is not the first attack against Africa. I've seen this is like the seventh or eighth movement against Africa that I've seen since I've been involved in this work. And just like all the other ones, this one will pass because it's not rooted in truth. It's not rooted in history. It's not rooted in what's in the best interests of our people. So we are going to continue to do our work. We are African people, nothing else. Like Malcolm X said, you pull kittens out the oven like you pull biscuits. You don't call them biscuits just because they came out of an oven. So how the hell are we going to be Americans just because we were kidnapped and brought here? I'm not confused about that. I'm still what I was. I'm an African in the United States fighting against capitalism all over the world. That's my. Every people ask me what do you identify as? I'm an African in America fighting against your backward capitalist system. I tell people that every day, and they have to respect it because they can look at me when I'm saying and say, okay, that person has dignity. I gotta respect that. Every time I wear African clothes, the people who ain't African look at me and they have respect because there's all these contradictions, y'all. Y'all got to understand it. There's all these contradictions. We don't see the dollars right now in Africa, but we still know there's respect in understanding who you are. Because if you're living a lie, you know that's not stronger than living in truth. So we thank you for joining us. We ask you to come back next week. August 30th, we're going to have a very important program, same time, same platform, the critical history of the Chicano moratorium. That comes up the end of next week. It's a very important movement to all peace and justice loving people. So we want to use this space to acknowledge and commemorate it. So come back next week and join us for that. The QR code in the upper left, the red and white one, you scan that, you can gain access to the Forward Ever shop. Please do that. Buy clothes that reflect positive, revolutionary African messages and help us finance our work at home in Africa. And go to Hood Communist as well. If you're in the Sacramento area, Northern California, take a trip up. If you're not here, or tell people you know in the area, tell them to come to our Thursday community self-defense classes. 6 to 8 p.m. every Thursday, 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15 in Sacramento. We are doing a number of good things. We spent a lot of time last week practicing evading punches and kicks, teaching you how to throw a proper punch, how to throw proper kicks. What else do you need? This is how you keep yourself faced. Teaching, going over, practicing, identifying threats around you before they exert themselves so that you're prepared for them. We do all those things to help you protect yourself, your family, your community. They are coming after us. And the only plan you got is dialing 911. You're in bad shape. So let people know. Come on out. Every Thursday, we're doing it. Join the APRP, aprp-intl.org. You can do that. The self-defense classes are free, by the way. People always ask me, how much do you get paid to? We're revolutionaries. We're not getting paid. We're doing work for the people. I mean, you just have such a sick capitalist mentality that you can't even imagine people doing something for people unless they're getting paid for it. This is our problem. Join the APRP. The QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one, become a monthly sponsor. Scan that one for the work that we're doing in the Sahel region, in Africa, Burkina Faso, Niger, bringing in revolutionary literature so that we can raise the consciousness of our people. This is how we get out of this confusion. And in the upper right-hand corner, I have my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8 paperback, 5 digital. 100% of the proceeds go towards our work that we do. There's a QR code next to it, so please scan it so you can order copies of the book. If you've already done that, it's very much appreciated, but we need you to continue to work with us. And the way you can do that is contact your bookstores, have them order it. They can buy copies for $8 and then they can sell it for 12, $15. People are going to buy it. It's a great organizing book, if I can say so myself. But I don't have to say so, because when you scan the QR code, there's dozens of people who are telling you that on the review page. So go ahead and check it out and get your bookstore to order it. Help them do it. Walk it through it. Do some work. You know, we always want to get around doing any work, and then we wonder why we don't make any progress. We got to do some work, you all. Talk to your bookstore. Have them do it. Don't just send them an email. Call them. Go by there. Talk to them. Tell them, hey, this is a good book you can have in here. Get book people to order it for their bookstore clubs. Suggest it to people that they read it. All the proceeds go towards 100%, not 50%, not 75, not 90, 100% go towards our work that we're doing, our supplies that we need. We're doing patrols for police that are terrorizing our people, for ICE that are terrorizing people. You know, ICE is coming after our Haitian family now. That means that no African is safe. We need supplies, we need radios, we need things to do that. A lot of that money comes from this book. So help us out, please. Thank you for joining. Forward ever. Enjoy the rest of your day.